Sounds of the Week on iRadio.
I would like to take this opportunity to appeal to regional bodies, IGAD, AU, UN. Moment has come for you to do an action under the responsibility to protect under the spirit of solidarity with the spirit of integration, to move beyond issuing statements. Pressing statements does not bring an end to the situation. We wish that a joint trilateral AU, IGAD, UN should have a high delegation that come to the country to speak to our leaders.
Sounds of the Week on iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. Live from Juba, on air and online.
This is iRadio News.
Hello, this is iRadio 1 o'clock news. First, here are the headlines. SPLM-IO Deputy Chairman Oyed Nathaniel Pierino has confirmed that First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar has been put under house arrest in Juba. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Africa Affairs said it was concerned about reports that First Vice President Riek Machar is under house arrest and urges President Salva Kiir to reverse the action to prevent further escalation. And the IGAD Executive Secretary has warned that if current situation in South Sudan is unchecked, it could lead to a collapse of the transitional process and a relapse into full-scale war with devastating consequences for its people and the region at large. Tune in for these stories and more coming to you in our news bulletin with me, Wal Mapal, and now the news in detail. The SPLM-IO Deputy Chairman Oyed Nathaniel Pierino has confirmed that First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar has been put under house arrest in Juba. In a press statement, Honorable Oyed said a convoy of security forces from the National Security Service, Tiger Division and SSPDF forcefully entered Machar's residence at 9:46 p.m. on Wednesday, March 2026 and placed him under house arrest. The first Deputy Speaker of Parliament also claimed that the security officials were acting under orders from Salva Kiir. He further alleged that Machar's security personnel were also arrested and taken to unknown locations. Oyed warned that the detention of Machar threatens the collapse of the 2018 Revitalized Peace Agreement, which ended the civil war in South Sudan. His statement partially reads, and I quote, "The arrest and detention of His Excellency Dr. Riek Machar effectively brings the agreement to a collapse. Thus, the prospect for peace and stability in South Sudan has now been put into serious jeopardy. Consequently, we would like to declare that with the arrest and detention of His Excellency Dr. Riek Machar, the RXS 2018 has been abrogated." The SPLM-IO official also raised concerns over reported military attacks on cantonment sites and training centers in Wuliat, Ashwa and Rajaf, calling them violations of the permanent ceasefire and the 2017 cessation of hostilities agreement. Oyed urges IGAD, the African Union, C5 countries and the United Nations to intervene and ensure the immediate and unconditional release of Machar, Angelina Teny and other political detainees. He also called on SPLM-IO members and the public to remain calm as diplomatic efforts continue to resolve the situation. When contacted, Deputy National Minister of Information David Yao said he was gathering information and would give a statement shortly. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Africa Affairs said it was concerned about reports that First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar is under house arrest and urges President Salva Kiir to reverse this action to prevent further escalation. The country has lately experienced deteriorating security situation and a breakdown in working relationship among the 2018 peace partners following the outbreak of violence in Nasr in Upper Nile State, Western Equatoria and Western Bahr el Ghazal states. Washington's Bureau of Africa Affairs said in a statement on X that it is time for South Sudanese leaders to demonstrate sincerity and commitment to peace. The statement reads, and I quote, "We are concerned by reports South Sudan's First Vice President Machar is under house arrest. We urge President Kiir to reverse this action and prevent further escalation of the situation. It's time for South Sudan's leaders to demonstrate sincerity of stated commitments to peace." End quote. The government is yet to release a statement clarifying the situation. Meanwhile, the UN mission in South Sudan has indicated reports that Machar was detained and urged all parties in the country to exercise restraint and uphold the 2018 Revitalized Agreement. This despite President Kiir affirming his unwavering commitment to restoring peace and insist is resolute to ensure the country never returns to war, in his meeting with religious leaders. Some South Sudanese citizens in Juba have also denounced the current political detentions and violence in parts of the country and appealed to the transitional government to prevent a return to conflict. Elsewhere, the IGAD executive secretary has warned that if current situation in South Sudan unchecked, it could lead to a collapse of the transitional process and a relapse into full-scale war with devastating consequences for its people and the region at large. In a statement released this afternoon, Dr. Wokne Gebeyu reiterated IGAD's readiness to support mediation efforts and called upon regional and international partners to reinforce the imperative of preserving peace in South Sudan. He said IGAD expresses alarm over reports of the house arrest of first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar. Dr. Wokne is urging signatories to the 2018 peace agreement to exercise maximum restraint, prioritize dialogue and resolve differences through inclusive and impactful peaceful means. According to the regional body, the development seriously undermined the revitalized peace agreement and risks plunging the country back into violent conflict. Dr. Wokne recalled the communique of the 43rd Extraordinary IGAD Assembly of Heads of State and Government on 12th March 2025, calling on all parties to immediately refrain from unilateral actions that violate the spirit and letter of the peace accord. The statement concludes that the people of South Sudan deserve lasting stability, not a return to conflict. IGAD also reaffirmed its commitment to the full implementation of the revitalized peace agreement and urged all stakeholders to act responsibly in the interest of peace and national unity. You are listening to iRadio News. IGAD envoy Ismail Weiss is pleading with South Sudan leaders to de-escalate the tension and resolve their differences through dialogue instead of violence. Ambassador Weiss issued a stark warning about the escalating crisis in the country, urging leaders to de-escalate tensions and return to dialogue. Speaking at the launch of civic education for the National Constitution Review Commission in Juba this morning, Weiss abandoned his prepared speech, stating that the events of last night had deeply shaken his confidence in the peace process. He said the situation is putting the country's fragile peace at risk and should not continue.
For today's event, a speech of hope and shared commitment. But after the alarming news of last night, I could not in good conscience deliver those words. Instead, I stand before you with a heavy heart, burdened by the unfolding crisis that threatens to strangle the fragile peace we have fought so hard to build. Once again, South Sudan stands at the crossroad between peace and peril, between unity and destruction. The recent escalation of violence among the very parties entrusted with safeguarding the revitalized peace agreement are access, threatened to undo every gain we have made. This cannot continue.
Weiss warned that South Sudan stands at a crossroads between peace and destruction as violence among parties to the revitalized peace agreement threatens to undo years of progress. He stressed that peace cannot be achieved through violence and urged leaders to resolve their differences through dialogue and not confrontation. Addressing South Sudanese leaders directly, Weiss reminded them of their sacrifices for the country's independence and warned against letting political rivalries and mistrust undo the nation's hard-won peace. He also called on leaders to listen to their people, mostly mothers, children and farmers, who he said want nothing but peace.
To the leaders of South Sudan, I urge you, I beg you, I appeal to your conscience. You fought for this nation's independence. You bled for its freedom. Will you now allow petty rivalries, mistrust and ambition to destroy what you sacrificed so much to build? The world is watching. History will judge. This is not just about politics. It is about moral responsibility. You swore to lead, not to plunge this nation back into darkness. The young generation looks to you not as the warlords, but as leaders and peacemakers. The mothers, the cattle herders, the farmers, the children, They are all crying out for one thing only, and that's peace.
The IGAD envoy reaffirmed the regional body's commitment to supporting South Sudan's peace process, but insisted that the responsibility ultimately lies with the country's leaders. He called on them to de-escalate tensions, return to negotiations, and ensure that the fragile gains of the past 7 years are not lost. The Executive Director of Community Empowerment for Progress Organization, SEPO, has released a 5-point action plan for the transitional government, including cessation of hostilities if the country is to prevent further conflict. Emmanuel said recent incidents of armed violence in South Sudan are a clear indication that there is a silent war going on, although it has not been declared yet. He said the occurrences of armed violence between the SSPDF and the SPLA-IO around Juba is threatening the fate of the political transition in the country. The activist said the renewed hostilities indicate that leaders have resorted to violence as a means to resolving their political differences. Mr. Yakani laments that such actions might drag the country into a certain civil war.
We are all aware that there is a silent war going on, though officially it's not declared by our parties who are signatory to our acts. Because the recent occurrence of armed violence between the SSPDF and the SPLA-IO around Juba is threatening the fate of the political transition in the country. And you are aware that 2 incidents happened the day before yesterday and yesterday. These are all much more close proximity from Juba City, which is estimated 10 to 15 miles out of Juba. This is a clear declaration, or this is a clear indicator that our political leaders have opted to resolve their political differences in a violent manner. The approach of resolving political differences in a violent manner is dragging the country to a disasters that are man-made.
To end the violence, Yakani recommended cessation of hostilities, urgent facilitation of dialogue, and the immediate rolling out of the security arrangement. Other measures include an end to confrontational language, hate speech, hostile propaganda, and misinformation, and allow IGAD to deliver on the communique of its 43rd Extraordinary Summit on the situation in the country.
We are urging our leaders to immediately embrace dialogue because the country is returning to war. Further, we are witnessing increased new humanitarian challenges at a particular moment where the donors of humanitarian aid are distancing themselves from supporting the humanitarian assistance. So as a Community Empowerment for Progress organization, we suggest the following 5 action points. We are calling for our leaders to really implement these 5 action points. Number 1 is immediate cessation of hostility. Number 2, we are urging for facilitation of a dialogue between our leaders through the mediation of our religious leaders. And we are aware that all religious leaders are engaging our leaders. The third one is that we want to see immediate rollout of the unification of the forces. As you are aware that the issue of the unification of the forces is becoming a big challenge with the fate of Chapter 2 of the agreement. And if the unified forces are not really sorted out once for all, this confrontation will never avoid it. It will continue throughout the lifespan of the political transition in the country.
Despite several calls from the international community, religious leaders and concerned citizens for the parties to dialogue have not been heeded to. You are listening to iRadio News, and finally, before the regional international stories, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management has said the government will relocate Sudan refugees from Reng to Malakal before the onset of the rainy season. Albino Kolatak says this move aims to prevent further hardships for those affected by the ongoing crisis. With thousands of people still stranded in transit centers and struggling with inadequate shelter and basic services, the relocation is seen as a crucial step in mitigating risks associated with flooding and deteriorating living conditions. Minister Atak says the government, in collaboration with humanitarian partners, is working to mobilize resources to ensure a smooth transition for the displaced populations.
We try to move these people away from Reng and Malakal as soon as possible. We try to expedite their movement away from there. This is because of the rainy season that is coming. We don't need the rainy season to get them there. We also agreed that we will continue mobilizing more resources for Ireland to continue supporting and operating to support people of South Sudan, especially the vulnerable people. We also reflected on what their counterparts do in Egypt to transport and to repatriate our people there in Egypt, which is also going on. And with assessment, I believe those people need to come, will be taken back to to South Sudan.
By January 2024, more than 1 million people have arrived in South Sudan since the conflict in Sudan erupted in April 2023, marking a significant humanitarian crisis. This record-breaking displacement has been confirmed by the International Organization for Migration and the United Nations Refugee Agency through biometric registration, flow monitoring, and population tracking. The majority of arrivals, over 770,200 people, entered through Unthau, Joda, on South Sudan's northern border. Other strategic entry points include Majong-Yinthio in northern Bahar Ghazali State, Panakwaj in Ruweng Administrative Area, and Amiat in Abia Administrative Area, which have become essential transit hubs. Most of the displaced are South Sudanese nationals who had previously sought refuge in Sudan during South Sudanese civil war. However, thousands of Sudanese nationals and other foreign residents have also fled to South Sudan in search of safety. In our part, Vijaya Sori, Chief of Mission IOM South Sudan, emphasized the urgent need for emergency humanitarian assistance for those crossing into South Sudan due to the Sudan war. She emphasized on the importance of strengthening cooperation to address protracted displacement, helping long-term displaced individuals regain self-reliance, return to their lands, and rebuild their livelihoods. IOM South Sudan, via Vijaya Sori, Chief of Mission, spoke on State TV SSBC yesterday after meeting the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs.
Especially with respect to the Sudan war and the assistance needed for those who are crossing over into South Sudan in need of emergency humanitarian assistance, as well as how we can cooperate more strongly in looking at issues of protracted displacement and how to help people who have been displaced for a very long time make their way to the path of self-reliance and recovery, occupying their old lands and being able to thrive on their own.
You are listening to iRadio 1 o'clock news, and now to the stories on the region and international scene. Here is Nyathong William.
Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa on Tuesday appointed the country's army chief as sport minister. A statement from the presidency Tuesday said Anselm Sanyatwe had been retired and reassigned to head the sport docket. The sport vacancy became available this month after Christy Coventry was elected president of the International Olympic Committee. Sanyatwe's removal has army chief comes at a time of increased political spurring ahead of general elections set for 2028. Elsewhere, firefighters are racing to save people and ancient artifacts from the largest wildfires in the South Korea's history, which have killed at least 27 people so far. Tens of thousands have been displaced in the blasts, which started in the southeast on 21st March. Most of those killed were in their 60s and 70s, local officials say. And finally, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said he hopes the US will stand strong in the face of Russia's demands to lift sanctions as a condition for a ceasefire in the Black Sea. Moscow said a maritime truce announced on Tuesday to allow safe passage for commercial vessels will only begin once Western restrictions on Russia's food and fertilizers trade have been lifted. Zelensky was speaking during a panel interview in Paris with journalists from across Europe. That is all in the stories making headlines in the region and international. And now back to you, Wal Mapal.
A vote of thanks, Nyathong William, for the regional and international updates. And now to the world of sports. Before the headlines, here is Memo Lesuba.
Thanks, Wal Mapal. In the world of sports, let's begin at home. The South Sudan Premier League second round is set to resume today following the FIFA international break, kicking off with an exciting clash between Korean Bor and Holy Family. Holy Family, currently second in the league standings, will be aiming to solidify their position as the race for the title intensifies. In another anticipated fixture, Al Hilal will play Olympic rank on 28th, while Benchi City will face Qatar on March 29. The league is set to conclude on May 31st, 2025, with teams battling for the championship in South Sudan's top football competition. The South Sudan national football team is set to return from Libya tomorrow after playing their 5th round match in the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers against South Sudan. The match ended in a 1-1 draw, earning South Sudan a point and bringing their total to 3 points, placing them 5th in the group standings. Earlier, the team suffered a 1-0 defeat against Congo in the 4th round. South Sudan will now prepare for the 6th round match, a home fixture against Congo in Juba this September, as they seek to improve their standing in the qualification campaign. Finally, LeBron James scored the match winner with time almost up as the Los Angeles Lakers ended their losing streak with victory against the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers held a 1-point lead with 40 seconds remaining, but James was on hand to tip in a Luka Doncic missed a split second before the buzzer to secure a 120-119 victory in the Indianapolis. James did not make a field goal until the 4th quarter, but finished the night with 13 points, 13 rebounds and 7 assists. The Lakers, 4th in the Western Conference, improved their record to 44-28 after ending 3-game losing run. That's all in the world of sports. Back to you, Walma Paul.
Thank you, Lasuba Memo, for the sports updates. And here brings us to the end of our stories this afternoon. But first, let's have a quick recap of headlines once again. SPLM-IO Deputy Chairman Nathaniel Perino has confirmed that first Vice President Dr. Riek Machar has been put under house arrest in Juba. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Africa Affairs said it was concerned about reports that first Vice President Riek Machar is under house arrest and urges President Salva Kiir to reverse the action to prevent further escalation. And the IGAD Executive Secretary has warned that if current situation in South Sudan is unchecked, it could lead to a collapse of the transitional process and a relapse into full-scale war with devastating consequences for its people and the region at large. That is the end of Ireland Afternoon News. If there is a story or an event you would like Ireland to cover or report about, please don't hesitate to send us a text message on +211 925 287 870. It's also our WhatsApp number. Follow us on X at iRadio Juba, like our Facebook page, iRadio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at iRadio South Sudan. You can also visit our website and listen to us online at www.iradio.org.